Whoa, all 3 of the original Cairos rune dungeons in one video? That sounds crazy. Well, I am crazy, and that's what the video's about. We're starting off with Giants because it's widely believed that Giants is the first major milestone for a new player coming into Summoner's War. We'll start off with the leader, Veramos the Dark Ifrit. If you happen to start playing within the Sky Fever season events, then you probably already have a Veramos in your box. If not, you're gonna have to fuse one. For our purposes here today, we're gonna rune him on Rage. I really like focusing Veramos on a Bruiser build. Speed, crit damage, HP on your 2, 4, and 6 slots. Aim for high crit rate. We're looking for like 80, 85. If you can get to 90, I'll be really happy, but it's also not expected. But don't slack on the speed because you want him to move so that way he can frequently cleanse off that defense break that the boss's tower is gonna try to put on you. That's the main reason why he's there. That and the max HP damage scaling on his second skill. This unit should probably be the first one to move on the team, and it's your defense breaker. For the purposes of our video today, I'm gonna recommend Second Awakened Beladion, though you could also technically use either Lauren or Prilea. Or if you're feeling brave and overly trusting, you could also include Galleon on this comp. The only thing is then you're kind of down a healer. So yeah. The reason I'm not outright suggesting Fran and Lauren, like back in the day, is because the boss has a revenge counter. Once he takes 7 combined hits, then he's going to attack back in an AoE fashion. And let me tell you, the revenge hurts a lot more than B10 through B1. Like, it's gonna hit everybody now, and it's bad. So you'll generally want to avoid units that hit multiple times, especially on their first skill. And Beladion brings a single hitting defense break, a strip to remove the attack buff, and even a smart heal and attack bar boost. Beladion's a really smart dog. In fact, we actually just gave Beladion a monster spotlight on the channel. When I say smart heal or smart strip, it means that Beladion's only going to use those skills when there is something to remove from the boss, or if a unit is below 50% HP. Beladion can be on Swift, Speed, HP. Just look for accuracy in the substats because you really want him to land that defense break. And for your artifacts, look for substats that include things like increased recovery or reduced incoming damage from water sources. So we've covered 2 of your 5 units so far. Your third one is going to be Shannon, Second Awaken. This is the Wind Pixie, the 2-star. Shannon is serving a dual purpose for us. She's applying attack buff to increase our damage output while also reducing the amount of damage that we're taking from our enemies. That's thanks to a defense buff as well as a glancing debuff that she can put on people. So like every single unit with a Second Awakening that I mentioned today should generally be Second Awaken, but I would say that with Shannon, you have the most wiggle room. So if you don't want to put her through the dimension hole, you don't necessarily have to. It's more for the base stats that we're doing it. Because generally speaking, the boss is going to be glancing on her, or she's just going to be tanky, so it won't matter. With Shannon on your team, you basically have a second healer too, because reducing the amount of damage that you're taking is basically healing, because you didn't lose the HP in the first place. So you have theoretically healed. You're at a higher health total than you would have been if you didn't have the defense buff on, or if they didn't glance. Thanks, Shannon. You can put Shannon on a Swift set if you're so inclined, Speed, HP. Probably the easiest monster to rune. You could try to splash a little bit of accuracy, but you could also look for that in the substats of your artifacts to supplement. The last 2 slots on your team are where you'll have the most flexibility. These are your damage dealing units. I'm gonna list off a few monsters that you can choose from. Things that we're looking for, just general high damage output, or max HP damage scaling. And out of the 2, we would definitely prefer the max HP damage scaling. So to that effect, I'm gonna recommend Shaman, the Light Griffin, who didn't have a secret dungeon the last time we covered this on the channel, but now he does. He's even easier to get than before. I have heard of people using his brother Spectra for this dungeon too, but I don't like the chance to glance, and at the same time, I'm gonna recommend you bring Shaman in a few different dungeons today. Actually, I'm only covering a few dungeons, so he's gonna be in every dungeon. So you might as well build him now. You can rune Shaman on either Fatal or Rage, go for speed, crit damage, attack. You could also swap out that 6 slot to HP to make sure the Shaman lasts a little bit longer on the team. Look for increased crit damage skill 2 in your artifact substats. Other options for max HP scaling, you've got the Wind Homunculus or Akamamir, the Wind Ifrit. Either one is fine. I have built both, and I'm still using the Wind Homunculus to this day, and I find that he is a really good sub-in on the speed team that features Teshar. So if you're ever hoping to upgrade, he and Shaman might actually graduate to the higher version of the team. So if you're asking me personally which ones I recommend the most, it'd be those 2. But I suppose in theory, you could also use the Second Awakened Crow or Naomi for this part too. But just note, they don't actually deal max HP scaling damage, they just have big damage in general. which is going to seem a little less big when you're in an Abyss dungeon. And for whichever second damage dealer you end up choosing, you'll want to emulate that same style that we talked about for Shaman. So aim for Fatal or Rage, go for Speed, Crit Damage HP, or Speed, Crit Damage Attack. Attack on slot 6 is extra important for things like the Wind Homunculus who have built-in Revive. You really want them to do damage. If you're looking for another max HP damage scaling monster, you could also use the Water Magic Order Guardian, who's available in the Ancient Coin Shop. You got big damage on skill 3, AoE defense break on skill 2 with a little bit of attack bar reduction. It's pretty good stuff. And the damage on skill 3 increases if the enemy can't be stunned. Bosses can't be stunned, so you get max value out of that. But you'll want to aim for a little bit more attack on him because the scaling is slightly better for attack than it is for crit damage. Sick. All right, later. So that's the starter team for Giants. Giants Abyss, down. Let's move on to Dragons. So in Dragons, the speed tuning for your team is a little bit more tight than in Giants. Back then, it was a little bit more loosey-goosey. It's like, oh, Belladon goes first, Shannon, and then everybody else can just kind of go when they want to. But this one, there is an order. So I think it's probably best for us to actually cover it by turn order. So let's do that. The first to move on your team is Lauren, the light cowgirl. Lauren's whole job is defense break and strip. And you want her to move first so that way she can set up the defense break for your damage dealer following shortly after. And being this fast means that she'll have opportunities to circle back around and then try to strip the boss when he eventually gets immunity put on him. You're gonna want to rune Lauren on Swift so that she can get the first turn, Violent if you can swing it, or you can also rune her on Triple Fight. But admittedly, it's hard to do Triple Fight right at the start, and this is a beginner's guide after all. So I would say focus on Swift or Violent, considering that the game does give you some sources for Violent runes at the start. Speed, HP, HP, or Speed, HP, Accuracy, because Accuracy is a pretty important stat for her. In fact, it's the second most important stat for her, right after Speed. It goes Accuracy, Speed, no, wait, it goes Speed, Accuracy, and then HP. Next, it's Crow, the Dark Unugami. So this is kind of an odd spot for Crow to show up on the turn order because he is ultimately a damage dealer. The reason why we're putting him here is so that way he can put branding on right after Lauren applies defense break. Then, your damage dealers following after Crow are going to have their damage even further enhanced by both the defense break and the branding. And honestly, if Lauren misses the defense break, it's a second chance at doing that too. He's got a team up on skill 2, so sometimes you can kind of correct a mistake just by accident with him. Like our other damage dealers, we'd ideally like Crow to be on either Rage or Fatal. You can use Blade runes to supplement any crit rate you might be missing. You can rune him on Speed, Crit Damage HP, or Speed, Crit Damage Attack. And just remember, crit damage doesn't do anything without crit rate. Those two stats are innately tied together, so if you're missing one, the other is just not going to be as impactful. But admittedly, the turn order is arguably the most important thing here, so if it takes Swift to get him to that second slot on the team, by all means, do what you gotta do. For this slot, you have a choice. You could run Spectra, the Fire Griffin, you could run Shaman, the Light Griffin, like we talked about in the last team, or you could run Rauk. Ultimately, they are gonna have similar results, high damage output. That's what we want, that's what you're gonna get. The thing that Spectra, the Fire Griffin, has above everybody else though, is a skill 3 on top of that. And that juicy skill 3 reduces the attack bars of all enemies and applies a slow and attack rate. Why that is so good is because you could in theory reduce the attack bar of the towers and then make it so that you have a little longer until the boss gets that immunity put on him. And that's great. It gives you a little bit more wiggle room in your stats, makes Lauren's job a lot easier, and you know, room to breathe is always welcome at Dragons. If you opt for Rauk, you can rune him on Attack, Crit Damage Attack, or Speed, Crit Damage Attack. Put him on Violent, and you'll have another source of defense break on skill 1, or a team-up effect that can have some pretty useful implications. You could end up pulling your Lauren again, your Crow, or even your Vertihile to boost your team up. He's also really good at clearing the waves thanks to his passive. And for Shaman, well, we've already kind of talked about Shaman in the Giants one. High damage, heal on skill 1. Great monster, and he's element neutral. The next monster on the team is the return of Veramos. He can be runed the same way across both. And let me tell you, that passive is even more important in Dragons, because the boss's damage output scales with how many debuffs you have when he attacks you. So Veramos is going to be super effective at cleansing those off because he gains attack bar based on how many debuffs are still remaining on your team after he attacks. Finally, your leader for the team, it's Verd, the Fire Vampire. By far the most important thing about Vertihile is that he has 100% crit rate. I'm telling you, if you get him at 95, you're gonna find that 5% where he doesn't crit. You move so much in dungeons compared to like PvP environments. It's gonna come up and it's gonna cost you the run. So if it takes 3 sets of Blade to get you to 100% crit rate, so be it. The reason why it's so important that Verd moves at this position in the turn order is because when he crits twice on his turn, and he will crit twice, right? He'll end up netting your entire team 40% attack bar. So you kind of want everyone else's attack bar to be as close to 0 as possible, meaning that they would have just finished up their turn. That way you're getting the maximum output from that 40%. You know, because if he's moving in the middle and somebody else's attack bar is at like 90%, you're functionally gaining 10% instead of 40. You're just losing out on 30% attack bar. That is the logic behind having him move last. So again, Fatal Blade, Rage Blade, Triple Blade, whatever it takes. He could even be on Violent. Just have him move last and 100% crit rate. Cool? Cool. 2 dungeons down, we got 1 more to go, and it's Necro. We're gonna cover this one by turn order as well, and it just so happens that we're gonna make your leader go first this time. So for this one, I'm recommending either Abigail, the Water Cannon Girl, or Ehrgar, the Dark Vampire Lord. They both have the same leader skill, 38% attack power lead in dungeons. Let's talk Abigail first, because I think she's probably the better option of the two. Abigail was essentially created in a lab to be the perfect anti-Necro boss weapon. Every time the boss attacks, he gets a shield that makes him immune for 7 hits. So that means multi-hits are going to be very important in this dungeon. Abigail's second skill hits 8 times. That is mathematically proven to be 1 more hit than is necessary to break the shield. It also applies defense breaks, so in a perfect world, you break the shield and have 1 hit left over that applies def break so it enhances the damage for everybody else. Literally the perfect monster for this dungeon. She also has a multi-hit on skill 1, so that means if you pull her with a team-up effect, you're gonna be contributing a lot. Considering that we're talking about Abyss dungeons and not B1 through B10, you should have some violent runes in your catalog that'll get you to enough speed so that she can start. But if not, I suppose you could put her on Swift as well. For her 2, 4, and 6 slots, go speed, crit damage, attack, or speed, crit damage, HP. We're not used to talking about damage dealers in the first one, but like she can kind of function as additional damage. And speaking of which, you should look for additional damage sources in your artifacts. You could also look for accuracy on skill 2 because it's pretty important. Though I will point out, my Abigail has 0 accuracy. There's actually a short about it on the YouTube channel. Luckily, Ehrgar, the alternative, has a lot of multi-hits too. None of them hit 8 times, but he does apply an attack buff and a vampire buff. So in a way, he's also kind of healing your team. So pick your favorite, rune him on damage. Only note about Ehrgar though, is that he doesn't need to be on violent. You could actually put him on rage, fatal, whatever floats your boat, because he has a built-in extra turn on his skill 3. Next up, Second Awakened Ikaru. Ikaru is the water Inugami, and you can make him pull up to 3 additional allies with his skill 2. It requires a lot of defense to do it, but let me tell you, it's a lot easier to rune 1 than it is to rune it on triplicate. You can rest easy now, Trickaroo. If you want more details on how to rune up an Ikaru, you can actually watch any of the Trickaroo videos that are on the channel right now, but I'll tell you right now, it's 2381 additional defense, assuming that you've got max defense in your profile. You can get there by doing guard sets, determination sets, whatever. I also found that the Cliff of Tough Beastmen and Lumel is a pretty good source for ancient guard runes, so if you really want a little bit of a boost there, you can have another way to try to farm up some guard runes for him. It's also probably the easiest of the Dimension Hole rune dungeons too. Once you've got your Ikaru runed up with enough defense, he's gonna be pulling 3 allies with him. So you've kind of manufactured a multi-hit here. If you're able to eventually swing it, you could do 2 guard sets and a fight set, so that way he's contributing attack to the whole team. When you're runing your Ikaru as well, try to remember to add in a little bit of accuracy, so that way if he's in a situation where he needs to apply defense break, you have that option. Your 2 artifacts can help with that too, and your main stat for both should be defense. Next up, Second Awakened Rogue. For this guy, you can rune him on violent, speed, crit damage attack, or attack, crit damage attack. He has a team up as well on skill 2. It pulls 2 allies with it with no prerequisite. And his skill 1 multi-hits sometimes. Just like we talked about in the Dragons one too, he's really effective at clearing the waves thanks to his passive. Next, it's Aster, Lapis' spicy sister. Aster's passive says that she deals additional damage as long as her opponent has higher HP than her, and bosses have a ton of HP. So if you throw her on a rage set, make sure she's on crit damage, like she will just put out numbers. If you don't have Aster, you can also use Second Awakened Crow. The only thing that I wanted to warn you about though is that the boss has a passive ability that lets him steal a unit from your team at the start of the encounter. And he's gonna take whoever has the highest attack power. And giving him somebody with a team up ability can sometimes be quite dangerous. So if it's not Aster, he's probably either gonna take Crow or Rogue. So just, be aware of that. It's really gnarly when it pops off. Crow can be ruined similarly to how you had him in the other dungeons. The only thing to be aware of though is that if you had him ruined exactly as we recommended for dragons, then he's probably a lot faster than Ikru and Raok. So you might want to slow him down if you're planning on using this one, but if you have an Aster, I'd say use her instead. The final unit on your team, which I would say is non-negotiable, Shaman the Light Griffin. He is finally farmable. You can get him from secret dungeons. He's element neutral damage, but he's even better here because if he's up against a dark attribute monster, that means he's gonna have 100% damage increase. So this guy is gonna be the all-star of your team, especially considering his skill 1 can heal. So combined with team up effects, you're gonna be healing quite a bit too. Put him on rage, just like everywhere else. So speed, crit damage, HP, or attack. Look for increased crit damage on skill 2 or increased damage dealt on dark. That's a starter team for each of the original 3 Cairos Rune Dungeon Abyss floors. Let me know if you have any alternative recommendations in the comments below, and if you wanna see speed teams in the future, let me know. All right, later. Happy farming.